After 3 years of relentless sacrifice, my father-in-law, the boss, handed the promotion not to me, but to his niece, who had been with the company for only 8 weeks. I submitted my resignation with a calm smile. "Congrats to Lily," I said. When Arthur read my letter, he exploded. "You can't be serious," he shouted, his face flushing crimson. Arthur's voice thundered across the conference room as he lifted his champagne glass. "I'm thrilled to announce our new regional director, my brilliant niece, Lily Monroe." Applause erupted around me, but I sat frozen, my hands resting stiffly in my lap, while everyone else clapped with enthusiasm. 8 weeks. Lily had been here exactly 8 weeks, and she was taking the position I had been promised for 3 years. I forced my lips into something resembling a smile and pressed my palms together in slow, deliberate claps. The sound rang hollow, like everything else in that moment. Across the table, Arthur's eyes met mine. Something flickered there. Guilt, perhaps, or defiance. But he looked away quickly. "Amy has been such a wonderful mentor to Lily already," he continued in that patronizing tone I'd grown to despise. "I know she'll continue to support our new director in any way she can." Support. The word tasted bitter. 3 years of 60-hour weeks. 3 years of skipped family dinners to close deals. 3 years spent building this department from 12 employees to 47. And now, I was expected to support someone else stepping into my role. Lily rose to her feet, her blonde hair immaculately styled, her designer suit crisp and expensive. She couldn't have been more than 28, fresh out of business school with an MBA and her father's connections. "Thank you so much, Uncle Arthur," she said brightly. "I'm really excited to learn from Amy's expertise as we transition into this new phase." Learn from my expertise. Transition. The corporate jargon made my stomach twist. This wasn't a transition, it was a takeover. After the meeting, I walked back to my office on unsteady legs. My nameplate still read Amy Hayes, Senior Operations Manager, but it felt like a lie. I had been passed over, and everyone in that room knew it. Some glanced at me with sympathy. Others avoided my eyes entirely. Margaret from accounting brushed my shoulder as she passed, whispering, "I'm so sorry, honey." I shut the office door and dropped into my chair, staring at the wall where my Employee of the Year plaques hung in neat succession. 3 of them, one for each year I'd given this company. What good had they done me now? My phone buzzed. A text from Joseph, my husband. "How did the announcement go? Finally official?" I stared at the message far too long before replying. "We'll talk tonight." The rest of the day blurred into forced normalcy. I answered emails, reviewed reports, endured meetings where colleagues glanced at me with that pity-tinged embarrassment. By 5 o'clock, my jaw ached from holding the fake smile in place. Arthur appeared in my doorway just as I was packing up. "Amy, could I have a word?" "Of course," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite mine, the same chair where he'd sat 3 months earlier, assuring me this promotion was a mere formality. He lowered himself into the seat, his broad frame filling it, his silver hair catching the overhead light. "I know today was difficult for you." "Was it?" My voice stayed level, professional. "Look, you're incredibly valuable to this company. Lily's going to need someone with your experience to get up to speed. I'm hoping you'll also take on a senior advisory role. Train her to do my job. Help her succeed in her new position," he corrected quickly, though we both knew what he meant. I leaned back, studying the man who'd been my father-in-law for 8 years. I had respected Arthur, admired his sharp business instincts, even appreciated the way he'd welcomed me into the family. But watching him now, trying to package betrayal as opportunity, something cold settled in my chest. "Arthur, can I ask you something?" "Of course." 3 months ago, you told me this promotion was mine. You said I'd earned it, that no one deserved it more. What changed? He shifted in his seat, fingers twisting his wedding ring. Business needs evolved. Lily brings a fresh perspective, new ideas. 8 weeks of fresh perspective versus 3 years of proven results, I countered. Amy, you're taking this too personally. Too personally? I almost laughed. This is my career, my life. How else am I supposed to take it? Your family, he said, as if that explained everything. Family looks out for each other. Lily needed this opportunity. And frankly, you're secure here. You don't need the promotion like she does. There it was. The truth. I was family, which meant I was expected to sacrifice for the good of everyone else, to accept the scraps, to be grateful, to remain dependable Amy, the one who cleaned up messes, who carried the weight, who never complained. I see. I rose from my chair, gathering my purse and jacket. Well, I should get home. Joseph's making dinner tonight. Arthur looked almost relieved by the change of subject. Give my son my love. I really do appreciate your understanding about all this. I nodded and walked out, my heels striking the marble lobby floor in sharp, deliberate clicks. Understanding? That's what he called it when someone swallowed betrayal and pretended it didn't sting. The drive home felt endless. Traffic crawled along the highway, leaving me far too much time to think. Arthur's words kept looping in my head, his casual dismissal of 3 years of my life. Family looks out for each other, except, apparently, when it came to looking out for me. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of fading gold. Joseph's car was already parked out front, and the warm glow of kitchen lights spilled through the windows. Home had always been my refuge, the one place I could shed the corporate mask and just be myself. But tonight, even that felt tainted. How could I face Joseph and tell him that his father had demolished my career with a smile and a champagne toast? I stayed in the car another 5 minutes, watching neighbors walk their dogs and water their gardens. Ordinary people, living ordinary lives, unaware that my world had just tilted completely off its axis. Tomorrow I would have to march back into that office, plaster on a professional smile, and train my replacement with grace while my heart fractured a little more each day. But tonight, I needed to sit in this car and feel the full weight of the betrayal. Tomorrow, I'd decide what came next. When I finally walked through the front door, Joseph had already set the table. The rich scent of his famous lasagna filled the kitchen, but for the first time in years, I had no appetite. He took one look at my face, pulled out a chair, and said quietly, "Sit down. Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the champagne toast, about Arthur's casual dismissal of my 3 years of sacrifice, about being expected to train the person who had stolen my place. Joseph's jaw tightened with each detail, his knuckles whitening around his wine glass. Dad actually said, "You were secure here, so you didn't need the promotion?" Joseph's voice carried a dangerous edge I rarely heard. Word for word. Joseph shoved back from the table, dragging his hands through his dark hair. "I'm calling him right now." "No." I reached across and caught his wrist. "This isn't your fight, honey. It's mine." But the damage was already done. The conversation I'd dreaded was finally over, and now Joseph was furious with his own father, another casualty of Arthur's betrayal. The next morning, I walked into the office with a fake smile glued to my face, bracing myself for what Arthur called my mentoring role. Right on the dot at 9 hours, Lily bounced into my office, armed with a color-coded planner and a level of perkiness that made my teeth ache. "Amy, I'm so excited to learn from you. Uncle Arthur says you know this department better than anyone." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Let's start with the Morrison account. They're our biggest client, and they've been with us since before you were born." For the next 2 hours, I guided Lily through our client management system, explaining the fragile relationships I had cultivated, the quirks and preferences of each contact, the balancing act required to keep everything steady. She scribbled furiously, firing off questions that only highlighted how little she actually understood. So, when Mr. Morrison calls, upset about delivery delays, what do I do? You don't promise anything you can't deliver, I said. You listen, acknowledge his concerns, and give him a realistic timeline, with a small buffer built in. But what if he threatens to take his business elsewhere? I studied her perfectly polished face, mascara flawless, lipstick fresh. She had no clue what she was walking into. Lily, Morrison Industries represents 30% of our annual revenue. If we lose them because of poor handling, 47 people lose their jobs, including you. Her pen froze mid-stroke. Oh. By lunchtime, my patience was fraying. Everything I had learned over years of trial and error, I was now expected to download into someone who had never even read a quarterly report. But the breaking point came when I should have been eating in peace. As I stood in the break room, heating up leftover soup, familiar voices drifted through the thin walls from Arthur's office next door. The building was old, and his booming voice carried like thunder. The transition is going perfectly, Arthur was saying, his voice carrying through the thin wall. Lily's picking everything up quickly. Are you sure Amy's okay with all this? That was Lily, her voice softer, uncertain. I froze, soup forgotten on the counter, and leaned closer to the wall. Amy's been dependable, but we need someone with fresh ideas. Lily, you're our future. Arthur's words hit me like ice water. She's good at following instructions, maintaining the status quo, but that's not what the company needs anymore. We need innovation, energy, and you bring that. But she seems so knowledgeable about everything. Some of the clients specifically asked for her. Arthur chuckled, a low, dismissive sound that made my stomach twist. That's exactly the problem. Amy's become a crutch for our clients. They're too comfortable with her. We need to shake things up, get them used to working with someone who'll challenge their thinking instead of just agreeing with everything they say. Challenge their thinking. I'd spent 3 years cultivating relationships built on trust and reliability, and Arthur saw that as a weakness. To him, my most valuable work wasn't an asset. It was an obstacle to his vision of the future. What about her feelings? Lily asked quietly. She worked really hard for this promotion. Amy's family, Arthur replied without hesitation. She'll understand that sometimes we have to make decisions for the greater good. Besides, she's not going anywhere. Where else would she go at her age? She's 42. Companies want young talent, fresh perspectives. Honestly, we're doing her a favor by keeping her on. At my age, 42, and apparently already obsolete. My fingers clenched around the counter's edge until my knuckles whitened, every nerve screaming at me to storm into that office and tell him exactly what I thought of his so-called greater good. I just feel bad, Lily continued. She's been so nice about training me, and I can tell she's hurt. That's because you have a good heart. But business isn't about feelings. Amy will adapt. She always does. That's what makes her valuable. She's predictable, reliable. She'll do whatever we ask, because she doesn't have any other choice. Predictable, reliable, no other choice. I grabbed my soup with trembling hands and walked back to my office. The rage burning inside me wasn't the kind that flared and faded. It was colder, heavier. The kind that seeps into your bones and settles there, reshaping everything it touches. For 3 years, I had believed I was building something meaningful. I thought loyalty mattered, that dedication counted. But to Arthur, I was nothing more than the hired help, someone to keep the gears turning until the real leadership was ready. In his eyes, I was a placeholder, a babysitter for clients until his precious niece could swoop in and take the reins. And the worst part? He wasn't wrong about one thing. I had been predictable. I had absorbed every slight, swallowed every disappointment, and smiled through every humiliation because I believed it would eventually pay off. But sitting in my office, staring at those Employee of the Year plaques while Arthur's words echoed in my head, I felt something shift. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into this building that morning. The woman who had spent 3 years proving her worth to people who would never see it. She was gone. That afternoon, I trained Lily with the same polished professionalism as always. Outwardly composed, every answer measured, every explanation calm. But inside, something new was forming. Every question she asked, every gap in her knowledge I filled, every relationship I laid out for her in painstaking detail. I was documenting my own value, not for Arthur's approval, not for Lily's benefit, for my own clarity. At 5 o'clock sharp, I packed my bag with deliberate calm. Tomorrow would bring its own revelations. But tonight, I had decisions to make. Later that evening, I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, a cup of tea cooling untouched beside me. Joseph was working late, leaving me the silence I needed. I had been thinking about this for weeks, and now there was nothing left to deliberate. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I began to type. Dear Arthur, please accept this letter as my formal notice of resignation from my position as Senior Operations Manager at Alden Ventures. My last day of employment will be Friday, March 15th, providing the standard 2 weeks' notice. I want to thank you for the opportunities I've had here over the past 3 years. I've learned a great deal and am grateful for the experience. I wish the company continued success in the future. Sincerely, Amy Hayes Short, Professional, Final. I read it 3 times, and with each pass, a strange peace washed over me. There was no anger in those words, no accusations or outbursts, just a clean, dignified severance from a situation that had become unbearable. I printed the letter on our home printer, signed it with my favorite pen, and slipped it into a crisp white envelope. Then I closed the laptop, turned out the light, and went to bed. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I dressed with deliberate care, my navy blue power suit, the one that always made me feel untouchable, paired with my grandmother's pearl earrings. If this was going to be a memorable day, I wanted to look the part. I arrived at the office early, before most of the staff filtered in, and placed the crisp white envelope squarely in the center of my desk. Then I carried on as if nothing had changed. I answered emails, reviewed reports, even helped Tom from accounting wrestle with a stubborn spreadsheet formula. At exactly 10 o'clock, I picked up the envelope and walked toward Arthur's office. His secretary, Marie, looked up with her usual warm smile. Good morning, Amy. He's just finishing a call. No rush. I'll wait. Marie had been at Arthur's side for 15 years, always kind to me. We'd shared countless quick conversations about her grandchildren, about my weekend plans. I wondered if she would miss those chats once I was gone. Probably not. Secretaries saw people come and go all the time. Arthur's door opened and he stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, his face drawn tight with irritation. He waved me inside without breaking stride in his conversation about quarterly projections. I sat in the familiar chair across from his desk and waited. When he finally ended the call, he glanced at me with thinly veiled impatience. What can I do for you, Amy? I've got back-to-back meetings until 3. I placed the envelope on his desk. He stared at it, then at me. What's this? Open it. Arthur slid it open with his letter opener, unfolded the paper, and began to read. I watched the color drain from his face, confusion, then shock, then something close to panic. His complexion shifted pale, then flushed, then crimson. You can't be serious, he barked, springing to his feet so fast the chair clattered backward. This is a joke, right? Some kind of negotiating tactic? I stayed seated, hands folded neatly in my lap. I'm completely serious, Arthur. Amy, we just promoted Lily 2 weeks ago. You can't abandon ship now. She needs your guidance, your expertise. The Morrison account alone? We'll be fine, I said evenly. Lily's enthusiastic. I'm sure she'll figure it out. Arthur began pacing behind his desk, running a hand through his silver hair. This is about the promotion, isn't it? Look, I know you're disappointed, but we can talk. Another title? More responsibilities. Maybe even a pay increase. Arthur, stop. He froze mid-step. I had never spoken to him in that tone before. Calm, measured, final. This isn't about the promotion anymore, I said. It's about respect. And I've finally realized I don't have any here. That's not true, he protested, voice rising. You're valued, Amy. Your family. I stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my skirt. No, I'm not. Family would have been honest with me about their plans. Family wouldn't have let me train my replacement without telling me that's what I was doing. Family wouldn't have called me predictable and reliable behind my back while saying I had no other options. Arthur's face went ashen. You heard that conversation? Every word. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with 3 years of unspoken truths. Arthur sank back into his chair, his shoulders slumping, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. Amy, please, let's talk about this rationally. Whatever you heard, you must have misunderstood. I understood perfectly. I moved toward the door, my hand closing around the handle. Then I paused, turning slightly. You were right about one thing, though. I have been predictable. I've spent 3 years making excuses for being overlooked, convincing myself loyalty would eventually pay off. But I'm done being predictable. What do you want? Arthur's voice cracked, equal parts frustration and desperation. More money? A corner office? Just name it. I turned back and met his eyes one final time. I want to work somewhere that values what I bring to the table, somewhere that sees potential instead of limitations, somewhere that doesn't think 42 is too old to have fresh ideas. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, Arthur had nothing to say. I opened the door and stepped out, leaving him with my resignation letter and the silence of a man who had finally realized what he'd lost. Arthur opened his mouth to respond, but I was already walking out the door. Marie looked up as I passed her desk, concern etched across her face. She had clearly heard Arthur's raised voice. Everything okay, honey? I paused and gave her a smile, a real one, for once. Everything's going to be just fine, Marie. Take care of yourself. Walking back to my office, I felt lighter than I had in months. The decision was made, the words spoken, and there was no going back. I had 2 weeks to wrap up my projects, document my processes, and transition my responsibilities. 2 weeks to say goodbye to a chapter of my life that had taught me more about myself than I ever imagined. When I sat down, the phone on my desk was already ringing. Word traveled fast in a small office, and I suspected the next 2 weeks were going to be very interesting indeed. But for the first time since that awful day in the conference room, I was genuinely looking forward to what came next. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks later, while I was reorganizing my home office. I had been officially unemployed for exactly 14 days, updating my resume, networking on LinkedIn, and wondering what the next chapter would hold. The number on my screen wasn't familiar, but something made me answer instead of letting it roll to voicemail. Amy Hayes, I said. Hello, Amy. This is Rebecca Chin from Horizon Tech. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Horizon Tech, the fastest growing company in the region. known for innovation, for merit-based promotions, for building leaders instead of placeholders. Not at all, I managed, steadying my voice. How can I help you? I'll cut straight to the chase, Rebecca said. Your name came up in a conversation with Daniel Morrison yesterday. He spoke very highly of your work at Alden Ventures and suggested we reach out. Daniel Morrison? Of course. The client I had nurtured for 3 years, whose trust I'd earned through late-night calls and weekend problem-solving. I had wondered if he'd even notice when I left. That's very kind of him, I managed. We have an opening for a regional operations director, Rebecca continued, overseeing 3 departments and managing our largest client accounts. Daniel seems to think you'd be perfect for it. Would you be interested in hearing more? My heart pounded. This wasn't just any job. This was the role I should have had at Alden Ventures. Only bigger, better, without strings attached. I'd be very interested, I said, my voice steady even as adrenaline surged through me. Within an hour, an email landed in my inbox. I nearly gasped at the details. The salary was 30% higher than what I'd been making. The benefits included stock options. And the title, Regional Operations Director, was exactly what I'd been promised at Alden but denied. The interview process moved swiftly. Rebecca introduced me to the team leads I'd potentially oversee, each one sharp, engaged, and genuinely enthusiastic about collaboration. The culture was refreshingly straightforward. No hidden agendas, no family dynasties, just clear expectations and transparent communication. During my final interview with CEO Marcus Williams, he leaned back in his chair and asked a question I knew was coming. Why did you leave Alden Ventures? Daniel said you'd been there for several years. I had rehearsed answers, safe and polished, but sitting across from Marcus, a man who had built his company on merit, not connections, I chose honesty. I hit a ceiling that had nothing to do with my performance or potential, I said. At some point you realize that loyalty without respect is just servitude. Marcus studied me for a moment, then nodded. We don't believe in ceilings here, Amy. We believe in earned advancement and mutual respect. Does that sound like something you could work with? It sounds like everything I've been looking for. 3 days later, Rebecca called with an offer that exceeded even my best-case scenario. As I scrolled through the contract, my chest tightened. Not with dread or resignation, but with something I hadn't felt in years, genuine excitement about going to work. My first day at Horizon Tech felt like stepping into another world. The building was sleek and modern, filled with bright, open, collaborative spaces and technology that actually worked. But more importantly, from the moment I walked through the doors, I felt welcomed, valued as a contributor, not merely tolerated as a necessary cog in the machine. My direct report, Sarah Martinez, had been covering operations in the interim and could easily have resented my arrival. Instead, she greeted me with a thorough project briefing and genuine enthusiasm for working together. I've been looking forward to this, she said as we reviewed quarterly projections. Rebecca mentioned your experience with large-scale client management. We've been struggling with the Anderson Group account and honestly, we could use your expertise. Expertise, not dependability, not reliability. Expertise. The difference struck me like a revelation. Within my first week, I was leading strategy sessions and making decisions with immediate impact. When I proposed restructuring our client communication protocols, an idea drawn directly from the battles I'd fought at Alden Ventures, Marcus not only listened, but insisted I present it to the board. You've been doing this for 3 years? He asked afterward, brows raised. And your previous employer never promoted you to director level? Apparently, I was too predictable for leadership, I said dryly. Marcus laughed, not at me, but at the absurdity of it all. Their loss is our gain. Predictability in results is exactly what we want in leadership. The Anderson Group was my first real test. They had been on the brink of leaving Horizon Tech for months, frustrated with missed deadlines and constant miscommunication. I spent 2 straight days preparing, pulling every tool from my arsenal of client relationship management. The meeting stretched to 3 tense hours, but by the end, not only had we secured their continued partnership, they agreed to expand their contract by 40%. As I shook hands with their CEO, I felt it. Not relief, not just validation, but the unmistakable thrill of being exactly where I was meant to be. "How did you do that?" Sarah asked as we walked back to the office. "I listened to what they actually needed instead of what I thought they should want," I said. Then I showed them exactly how we could deliver it. Word of the Anderson success spread quickly throughout Horizon Tech. Suddenly, department heads who'd barely acknowledged me before were seeking my input on their toughest client relationships. Marcus began inviting me into executive strategy sessions. "You know," he said after one particularly productive meeting, "I think we undervalued this position when we created it. Would you be open to discussing expanded responsibilities?" Expanded responsibilities. At Alden Ventures, that phrase had always been code for more work without recognition. But here, it felt like a genuine opportunity. By the end of my first month, I wasn't just managing operations, I was also leading a new client retention initiative. My team grew from 12 to 18, and our department's performance metrics hit their highest point in 2 years. Every morning, I walked into Horizon Tech. I felt the difference. My ideas weren't just tolerated, they were implemented. My experience wasn't just acknowledged, it was leveraged to drive growth. The contrast with my old life was staggering. At Alden Ventures, I'd spent 3 years trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I was expendable. At Horizon Tech, my worth was assumed. The focus was on how far I could go, not how tightly I could be contained. For the first time in my career, I understood what it meant to work for a company that valued merit over politics. 3 months into my role at Horizon Tech, industry gossip began trickling in through unexpected channels. At a quarterly networking event, I ran into Janet Mills from Pacific Financial, one of Alden Ventures' smaller clients. "Amy, I heard you moved to Horizon Tech. Good for you." Janet's tone carried more than polite congratulations. "Things have been interesting since you left." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh? Well, let's just say our new contact at Alden Ventures isn't quite as responsive as you were. 3 weeks to return a call? That never happened when you were handling our account." Before I could respond, another colleague swept her into conversation, but her words lingered. 3 weeks to return a call. I'd built my reputation on same-day responses. The contrast stung, but not for me, for them. The next piece of information came from a far weightier source. 2 weeks later, Daniel Morrison called me directly at Horizon Tech. "Amy, I hope you don't mind me reaching out," he began. "I do have a professional question, but I also wanted to give you a heads up about something." "Of course, Daniel. What's going on?" "We're probably going to end our relationship with Alden Ventures at the close of this quarter." My stomach tightened. Morrison Industries wasn't just any client. They were Alden Ventures' largest. Losing them would be catastrophic. "I'm sorry to hear that. May I ask what happened?" Daniel let out a weary sigh. "Remember how we used to have those monthly strategy calls? You'd walk me through the projections and we'd adjust based on market shifts?" "Of course." "Well, your replacement? Lily, I think. She's missed our last 2 scheduled calls completely. When she finally got back to me, she couldn't answer even the most basic questions about our account. Kept saying she'd get back with the information, but those follow-ups never came." I closed my eyes, picturing Arthur's face when he realized what was slipping away. Daniel continued, his voice edged with frustration. "The final straw was last week. We had a delivery crisis. $2 million worth of product stuck in the wrong warehouse. You used to drop everything. coordinate with logistics, call me with hourly updates until it was resolved. I remember, I said softly. Lily told us to file a complaint through the proper channels, and that she'd look into it when she had time. Amy, she treated a $2 million emergency like it was a paperwork hiccup. I felt a tangle of emotions I couldn't quite sort out. Satisfaction that my value was finally undeniable, but also genuine sadness for a company I had once poured myself into. I'm sorry it came to that, Daniel. I know Arthur valued your partnership. That's the thing. I don't think he did, Daniel replied. When I called to speak with him directly about our concerns, he basically told me Lily represented the new direction of the company, and if we couldn't adapt to their new approach, maybe we weren't the right fit anymore. My jaw dropped. Arthur had essentially invited his biggest client to walk away rather than admit promoting Lily had been a mistake. Anyway, Daniel continued, I just wanted you to know this decision isn't personal. It's not about animosity toward Alden Ventures as a whole. It's purely about service quality. And hey, the recommendation I gave Horizon Tech about hiring you, best business advice I've given in years. After we hung up, I sat in my office, the weight of it all sinking in. Losing Morrison Industries wouldn't just sting Alden Ventures, it would gut them. 15 people at least would lose their jobs. These weren't abstract numbers. They were real colleagues I'd worked beside for 3 years. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Amy, my assistant said, Rebecca Chin would like to see you when you have a moment. I found Rebecca in her office, surrounded by stacks of industry reports. She gestured to the chair across from her. Sit down, Amy. I've been hearing some interesting things about your former employer. My stomach clenched. Had word about Alden Ventures unraveling somehow made its way here? Would it reflect badly on me? The Morrison account was a nice win for us, Rebecca continued. But apparently, they're not the only Alden Ventures client looking elsewhere. We've had 3 companies reach out just this week, all asking about Horizon Tech's services, and every single one of them specifically mentioned your name. Relief surged through me, so strong it almost made me dizzy. Really? Rebecca smiled faintly. It seems you left quite an impression during your time there. The question is, how do you want to handle this? These could be significant opportunities for Horizon Tech, but I want to make sure we're approaching this ethically. I appreciated Rebecca's consideration. I think as long as we're responding to genuine inquiries rather than actively poaching clients, we're on solid ground. These companies have legitimate service concerns that we can address. My thoughts exactly. Would you be comfortable leading the presentations for these potential new accounts? Absolutely. Over the next month, Horizon Tech signed 4 new clients, all former Alden Ventures accounts. Each presentation followed the same pattern. Companies frustrated with declining service, missed deadlines, and poor communication. More than once, I found myself defending my old colleagues even as I pitched Horizon Tech. They're going through a transition period, I'd say diplomatically. But at Horizon Tech, we can offer you the consistency and reliability you're looking for. The most difficult moment came one evening when my phone rang at home. Margaret from accounting, my old colleague, was on the line. Amy, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Joseph. Of course not, Margaret. How are you? Honestly, there are rumors about layoffs. The Morrison account is gone, and apparently 3 other major clients have left too. Her voice wavered. My stomach sank. People are saying it's because you left, that you took all the client relationships with you. Margaret, that's not... I'm not blaming you, she cut in quickly. I understand why you left. We all saw how they treated you. But Amy, some of us have been with the company for years. We've got mortgages, kids in college. Her words twisted like a knife. If Alden Ventures went under, good people, people I cared about, would pay the price for Arthur's arrogance. I'd wanted him to see my value. I'd wanted vindication. But I had never wanted innocent people to suffer because of his choices. The weight of those unintended consequences settled heavily on my shoulders. "Are you looking for other opportunities?" I asked gently. At my age, who's going to hire a 58-year-old accountant? I thought about Horizon Tech's expansion plans, about the new positions we'd be opening as the company grew. "Margaret, can I give Rebecca Chin your contact information? We're going to need experienced financial support as we take on these new accounts." The relief in her voice was audible. "Amy, you do that. You're good at what you do. That should matter more than politics or age." After I hung up, something shifted in how I saw it all. This wasn't about Alden Ventures' collapse anymore. It was about people finding places where their contributions were valued. Some of my former colleagues would land on their feet, maybe even in better roles than they'd ever had before. Arthur's lesson, however, was now industry-wide. When you prioritize connections over competence, you don't just lose good employees, you lose the very foundation that keeps a business standing. 6 months after Margaret officially joined Horizon Tech, an invitation arrived in the mail that made me freeze. Heavy embossed cardstock, formal and elegant. "Arthur Alden requests the pleasure of your company at the Alden Ventures Annual Awards Dinner." I stared at it for a long moment, turning it over in my hands. What game was Arthur playing now? Joseph found me in the kitchen that evening, still studying the card. "You're not seriously considering going," he said, reading over my shoulder. "Actually, I think I am." He looked at me like I'd just suggested diving into shark-infested waters. "Amy, why would you put yourself through that?" "Because I'm not the same person who left that company in tears," I said quietly. "I want to see who I've become." The dinner was held at the Grand Ballroom downtown, the same glittering venue where I'd sat through those events 3 years in a row. But walking in that night, everything felt different. I wore a new dress, emerald green silk, that made me feel confident, powerful. More importantly, I carried myself differently. Rebecca had insisted on joining me. "Moral support," she'd said, though I suspected she was just as curious about the company foolish enough to let me slip through their fingers. The cocktail hour was as awkward as I'd expected. Former colleagues approached with polite smiles and careful small talk. Some seemed genuinely happy to see me thriving. Others avoided my eyes, as if my success cast an uncomfortable reflection on their choice to stay. Tom from accounting caught me near the bar. "Amy, we all miss you. Things haven't been the same since you left." "How is everyone adjusting?" I asked, keeping my tone diplomatic. "Well, Margaret getting that position at Horizon Tech was incredible for her. Honestly, it's inspired some of us to start looking around too. Sometimes you don't realize you've been settling until you see someone else refuse to." Before I could reply, the lights dimmed. Arthur stepped onto the stage. He looked older than I remembered. His silver hair had thinned, his face more deeply lined. The commanding leader I'd once respected now seemed smaller, diminished. "Welcome, everyone, to what has been a challenging but educational year for Alden Ventures," he began. His voice carried, but it lacked the conviction it once had. "We've learned valuable lessons about adaptation, about the importance of strong leadership, and about recognizing talent wherever it may be found." His eyes swept the room, then landed on me. For a moment, neither of us looked away. "This year, we're honoring employees who've shown exceptional dedication during difficult times, people who stepped up when we needed them most." The awards rolled on. Sales achievements, customer service excellence, innovation in problem solving. On the surface, everything was as polished as ever. But beneath it all, the energy felt strained, forced, like Arthur was trying to conjure a past that had already slipped beyond his reach. Then came the surprise. "Our final award tonight is new," Arthur announced, his voice carrying across the hushed ballroom. The excellence in leadership recognition goes to someone who may no longer be with our company, but whose impact continues to shape how we do business. My stomach dropped. Amy Hayes, would you please come to the stage? The room erupted in applause, but I sat frozen in my seat. Rebecca leaned in, her hand brushing my arm. Go on, this is your moment. Walking to that stage felt like the longest journey of my life. Arthur met me halfway, extending a crystal award that shimmered under the chandeliers. Amy, he said, his voice rehearsed but tight around the edges, your dedication to excellence and your commitment to our clients set a standard that continues to inspire our team. While we're sorry to see you've moved on to new opportunities, we want to acknowledge the foundation you built here. I accepted the award and turned to face the crowd, faces I'd known for 3 years. Some smiled warmly, others shifted uncomfortably, and a few, like Lily at Arthur's family table, looked outright mortified. Thank you, I began, my voice steady despite the thunder of my heartbeat. Working at Alden Ventures taught me valuable lessons about business, about relationships, and, most importantly, about knowing your own worth. I paused, letting the silence sharpen the edges of my words. I've learned that loyalty is important, but it should never be one-sided. That hard work matters, but only when it's recognized and valued. And sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself, and for your career, is walk away from situations that no longer serve your growth. The applause this time was hesitant, scattered, uncertain. I'm grateful for my time here because it led me to where I am now, at a company that values merit over politics, where ideas are heard regardless of who suggests them, and where potential isn't limited by artificial ceilings. I handed the microphone back to Arthur. His smile was strained now, a mask threatening to crack. Thank you again for this recognition. And to my former colleagues, remember that you have more power than you think. I let my eyes sweep the room, settling for an instant on Lily. Use it wisely. As I walked back to my table, silence hung heavy, until Margaret began clapping. Then Tom. Then others joined, scattered across the room. Not everyone applauded, but enough did to make the message resonate. After the dinner, Arthur approached our table as Rebecca and I were preparing to leave. Amy, could I have a word? Rebecca excused herself gracefully, leaving Arthur and me alone for the first time since my resignation. That was quite a speech, he said, his tone unreadable. It was honest. I suppose I deserved that. He looked tired, defeated in a way I had never seen before. You know, we're restructuring the leadership team. If you ever wanted to come back... Arthur, stop. I stood, meeting his eyes directly. 6 months ago, I might have been interested in proving something to you. Tonight, I realized I don't need to prove anything to anyone except myself. The company is struggling without you. The company is struggling because you made decisions based on family loyalty instead of business sense. That's not my problem to solve anymore. I picked up my purse and the crystal award, its weight grounding me in the moment. I hope things work out for Alden Ventures. I really do. But my chapter there is closed. Walking out of that ballroom, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The scared, overlooked woman who had once begged for Arthur's approval was gone. In her place stood someone who knew her value and wasn't afraid to demand that it be recognized. Rebecca linked her arm through mine as we reached the parking garage. So, how does it feel to have the last word? I smiled, genuinely happy for the first time all evening. Like freedom. The drive home was quiet, both of us processing what had just happened. When I finally stepped through my front door, Joseph was waiting with a cup of tea and a questioning look. How was it? Perfect, I said, and meant it. Absolutely perfect. That night, I placed the Crystal Award on my bookshelf beside a framed photo from my first day at Horizon Tech. 2 symbols of the same journey. One representing where I'd been, the other where I was going. The woman in that photo was confident, valued, unafraid to take up space in the world. She had always been inside me. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to emerge. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming the person you were always meant to be.